Thank you very much, and it really is an honour to be with you today at the Big Ideas Forum, a day which marks Africa Day, which celebrates Africa's freedom and future. And I want to thank my dear friend and sister, Obi Ezekwesili, for inviting me, and for the wonderful team at the School of Politics, Policy and Governance for looking after me so well. It's really wonderful to be back again in Nigeria. Now, the theme this year is brain health and mental well-being. And when I was first asked to speak to you all, I thought, I'm not a neuroscientist, I'm not a therapist. What contribution do I have to make on this topic? But I do believe the well-being of an individual is deeply connected to the context in which they live and the opportunities they have to develop to their full potential, to lead productive lives, and to contribute to their society. In other words, the well-being of an individual is related to the well-being of a community, a country, a continent. And I say this as someone who has lived and worked in conflict-afflicted societies, as well as societies where there is gross inequality. I recognize the effects of trauma on people's psyches, the humiliation of living under corrupt and incompetent leaders, the frustration at the lack of justice, the lack of opportunity. Now, you don't need me to recite the woes afflicting Africa. You all know them too well. And social media amplifies the comparisons, reinforcing the perception that life is better elsewhere. And all of this causes anxiety and mental health problems. Now, every year, I'm fortunate to speak to SPPG classes. And each year, it's daunting. In fact, it's quite terrifying. Imagine speaking to 200 Nigerians on Zoom. It's really, really scary. But this year, when I asked what policy issue that the students wanted to focus on, they chose food security. And during the class, a large percentage of students didn't have stable access to the internet, and the electricity kept going out. So how can we talk about a life worth living, a life worthy of humanity, if people don't have their basic needs? When basic needs remain unmet, striving for a meaningful life becomes much more difficult. So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share with you a positive vision for Africa's future, a horizon of hope, and a pathway to possible. By 2050, a quarter of the world's population, 2.5 billion people, will be African. Now, if sub-Saharan Africa can raise its productivity growth from around 1% per year to 4%, which is close to India's recent rate, by 2050, its share of world output will be 10%, and it would account for a fifth of global growth. Just imagine if Africa makes a quicker demographic transition, expands and improves education, increases investment in infrastructure, boosts agricultural productivity and manufacturing, and encourages greater financial flows, and implements the African Continental Free Trade Area. So if the free trade area becomes fully operational, creating a bigger single market, the World Bank reckons it could lift overall GDP by 7% by 2035 and take 40 million people out of extreme poverty. And Africa would have great bargaining power globally. So that's the horizon of hope. Now let me talk about the pathway to realize this. And let me start by telling you, Africa's got the human capital. Africa's got talent. And I share this with you from my perch as director of the Yale International Leadership Centre. We run a number of programs, including Yale World Fellows, Yale Climate Fellows, Yale Peace Fellows, and around a quarter of our fellows are Africans, and over half our applicants are Africans. Africa's got innovators, people like Tariq Mugani. We saw a broken banking system in Ghana and ran headlong into the problem. Tariq founded Affinity, a digital bank that provides affordable and accessible services to small businesses. For its customers, 90% of whom were previously unbanked and 60% of whom are women in the informal sector, financial inclusion is so much more than a buzzword. It's a revolution. Africa's got investors, people who move money with mission, like Tokumbo Ishmael, a Nigerian trailblazer in impact investing, using capital to scale solutions from a new generation of entrepreneurs, solving Africa's hardest challenges and building inclusive businesses that help folks reach their full potential. Or Abdurrahman Diallo from Côte d'Ivoire, who's making intra-African trade a reality from his seat at the Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. And oh, by the way, he has a few side hustles in plant cloning, clean cooking fuel, and electrification of Africa. Africa's got climate champions, visionaries like James Mwangi from Kenya. James sees how the continent that contributed the least to global warming can also contribute the most to addressing it. Through his venture studio, James is taking a big bet on Africa. Its demographics, its growth trajectory, its natural resource endowments, to power a net zero future for all. Africa alone possesses 40% of the world's renewable energy potential. How can we unleash Africa's potential as a global hub of climate action while underwriting a new climate-smart model of economic growth and inclusive livelihoods for the continent itself? Africa's got food system fixes. People thinking about how Africa needs to feed itself, not just today, but sustainably into the future. Folks like Soraya Hosni, a Tunisian social entrepreneur who founded Clever Harvest, which harnesses digital data points to increase yields while implementing sustainable farming practices. Her mission, not just to grow food, but to restore ecosystems and livelihoods across North Africa. Africa's got peacemakers, people who understand the drivers of conflict and the policies that are required to address conflict. Mediators who've got the skills to help broker settlements. I'm thinking of Hippolyte Ntagoriro, a Rwandan peace activist, artist, and a survivor of the genocide. He founded Be the Peace, a movement that uses storytelling, art, and community healing to prevent cycles of violence. A few years back, he walked across Rwanda for 100 days, one for each day of the genocide, as a living testimony of forgiveness, reconciliation, and unity. He's showing the world that peace isn't passive, it's built step by step. Africa's got storytellers. Stephanie Busari, who I had dinner with last night, the pioneering head of CNN's first digital and multi-platform bureau in Nigeria. She's a decorated journalist with a Peabody, Emmy, and Gracie Award. It was she who led CNN's coverage of the Chibok schoolgirls. Africa's got soul, musicians who have been uplifting the human spirit across the world for centuries. Asha, I got a ticket to see her in London in July, sold out already. And I mention these individuals and so many more, not only because they're Yale World Fellows, but because they're role models, and it's through them we're able to reimagine Africa's future. They give us hope. Africa's got hustle to harness. Africa's youthful population will be the force for change. They demand change. And this pathway to possible requires a new generation of leaders to harness that hustle, to attract greater levels of investment, to create larger and more dynamic private sectors, to make more productive farms. Africa needs not more small businesses, but rather large firms which bring together talent and tech more efficiently. This will lead to productivity gains and economic transformation seen elsewhere in the emerging world. A new generation of leaders with ambition who are able to inspire their populations with a vision to provide better public goods, to crack down on corruption. They've got to make governance more effective. And it's that new generation that OBI is cultivating through the SPPG and that we are supporting at Yale International Leadership Centre. And yesterday we ran a workshop for SPPG alumni. And we spent 4 hours together imagining an optimistic future for Nigeria and how to get there. And I was so impressed by the character, the competence, the capacity of the participants. People with energy, passion, commitment to building a better Nigeria. People with great levels of emotional intelligence. And these emerging leaders are leaders of the good society, leaders who live their lives with purpose. You've got one life. How are you going to live it? How are you going to use your leadership position for the benefit of those less fortunate? What are you going to do to make your time on earth meaningful? It was Socrates who said that the unexamined life is not worth living. So what is a mental health crisis? I see also as a leadership crisis. It's not unique to Africa, but maybe it's most severe here. And my wish for Africa is for leaders who grasp the continent's potential and who are committed to enabling citizens to develop to their full potential so that they can lead flourishing lives, lives that are productive, lives that contribute to the prosperity of their communities, countries, and continent, lives that are worth living. And this will make a tremendous contribution to addressing the brain health and mental well-being of Africans. And it's incumbent on all of us around the world to help. For the well-being of everyone in the world is going to depend on the next generation of African leaders and the future flourishing of Africa. So thank you.